everyone. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I'm Ellen, and I am dedicated to interviewing the truth tellers, the determined patriots, the anons, the digital soldiers, all who have been warriors in this most incredible time in history. And their stories are deserved to be told. Their courage, their insights, and their unwavering faith, I believe, will be studied and looked at for generations to come. And today, I am beyond thrilled to have one of the warriors of all warriors who also happens to be a candidate for governor of California. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Louis, for coming on. Yay! How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm excited to be here. I love your enthusiasm.
Yay. Well, I'm truly excited to be here and to tell people stories and to have you is such an honor. So I'm just thrilled. But I would love to first start just really kind of I want to go to the beginning of you and where you were born and all that. But
Sure.
right now, just give me the brief little summary of what you're doing right now. I know it's a lot, but just tell me where you are today and what you're doing today.
Well, the focus right now is we have a campaign and it's Herms for Cali, and that would be governor of California. Um, there's there was a vacuum of information that I thought was lacking from the candidates in regards to exposing human trafficking, election fraud, healthcare, the political control, big pharma. They just weren't talking about it, and I'm talking about the Republicans. And so I was asked often if I can throw my hat in the ring, and I him and hawed for a while, and I got this hit from God. It was less like, "Oh yeah, you are," and I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Yes," and I go, "Well, what's that look like?" And it says, "You're the disruptor. You're the one that's going there air and disrupt and change the way things are done." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." So that's what we're working on right now, and it's I have a phenomenal team, very excited the direction we're going. Our website and platform was just released, and we're already getting some good traction and some pretty decent endorsements too.
That's wonderful, and I love those hits from God. Those are the best.
Yeah,
And on the website, the Herms for Cali, that lists, I think there were 14 platforms. There are platforms on there that list the
17
different
actually.
things.
Yeah,
17,
there's
excuse me.
17 of them.
Of course, there are 17. And so
That's what
that's
I thought after I wrote them. I'm like, of course it's 17.
of course it is. But that's wonderful. And I'm thrilled and excited for you and your team. Um, Now I wanna just back up
Sure.
and just kinda start at your beginning. I would love to hear where you were born, your kind of family life growing up, and how it all started.
Yeah, so I have an interesting story, I guess. I mean, many people have asked me to write a book about it and tell it, so this is going to be interesting. I don't know if I've ever told my full story here, so this will be interesting. So, from a timeline perspective, I was born in the '60s in a town called Downey, California, and I actually was born dead, which many people
What?
don't know. Yep, I wasn't breathing. They couldn't detect a heartbeat, so they did whatever they did, and I believe they were back in the day. They're probably pounding on my tush and doing whatever they can, and then suddenly, and I was born purple, and suddenly I came awake, right? And it was interesting because my mom or my had an we had an older brother, and he was born still also. So
Oh,
and
wow.
he never made it. So
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
if you know I guess I'm here for a purpose. So
Yeah.
that happened, and then I guess 6 months later, um, I was in my crib. I don't know where my mom was, but they had a babysitter watching me, and she calls my dad up, and she goes, "I'm sorry, Lewis is dead." Can you imagine getting that phone call? he was
No.
about he was about 3 minutes away. He rushed home. He saw that I was completely purple, and I guess I was laying, I think, on my back, and I think they said don't lay him on his back because I had some huge sinus issues or whatever. So he recognized the issue right away. He slapped me on my back really hard from what I was told. All this mucus and things came out of my mouth and my nose, and I started crying, and then I was alive again.
Wow.
So that's the start of my life. And then my parents went through a separation at 2 years old, so I was living with my mom, moving forward, and we were extraordinarily poor. So my first few years of my life, we were living in roommates. In fact, I just recalled yesterday for somebody that was asking. I was in the 1971 Silmar earthquake at 5 years old, and I remember being in an apartment. I think I shared a room with my mom, and these remember when condiments were in glass, so ketchup and mustard
Yeah.
and pickles were
Yeah.
flying out of the cabinet and
Wow.
smashing on the ground. So so I kind of I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I think today we'd probably call that a latchkey kid because my mom was working multiple jobs and going to school. And love my mom, gave me some good principles, but the reality is I really raised myself in most
Yeah.
cases, which set me up for today because I'm very self-sufficient. You know what I mean? And back then
Yeah.
I did all our laundry for my mom and I did the cooking, the cleaning, everything, and listened to a lot of old music that I probably wouldn't have listened to because of the albums that she had, which was pretty cool. You know, Frank Sinatra, um, Barbara Streisand, Neil Diamond, American Pie, Jim Croce, things like that, which to this day I think are pretty awesome. So that was cool
Yeah.
because we didn't have video games back then and we didn't have phones. So I would just
Right.
replay, and we had maybe three or four working channels on a black and white television, right? So I would just play those records over and over. But I got very solution oriented because of that. So I would say, okay, where's a challenge? This is a challenge. Let me do this. Let me do this. And it set me up for success, but it also kind of made me a rebel because I was always doing things in a direction that other people weren't doing stuff. So growing up, we lived in HUD housing. So HUD housing, for anybody who doesn't know, it's government assisted housing. And I would, from probably about 6 or 7 to about 11, I was really, really good in sports, but I was undersized. So I would get my butt kicked about every single day for years by three guys that were a few years older than me, but I was much better than them. They were in sports. So their retaliation of that was just to beat me up every day.
Oh.
And then one
So I
day, go ahead.
keep going. Well, I wanted to go back first before you did that. So basically, you had a brother that didn't make it,
Mhm.
right? And so it was just you and your mom. But you think because of that, your mom held tighter onto you, um, because of that, and then obviously what happened to you in the crib, or did she, because she had to work and do everything, she basically had to have faith and kind of let you make your own decisions with things?
I don't know, honestly. Um, my There were some challenges with my mom. She was an extreme left wing liberal
You're
and
kidding.
hippie, a nudist. She was a nudist colonies, you know what I mean? So that was the thing. I don't even know if I talked about that. My dad was very, very conservative, which is very interesting, and I would only get to see him every 2 weeks. Um, so I don't know if she seemed very more interested in her life than mine, but on the upside, she gave me some phenomenal tools in regards to confidence and the way my outlook on life is. And she would always say, Lewis, don't push the river, let the river come to you. You know, very hippie like conversation. She was a studying at the time to be a marriage and family therapist, and she ended up doing that. Um, really into Freud. Even back then, I rejected Freud and all the teachings of that. So I had this nature of always, well, I'll figure it out on my own, which is good and which is bad, right? So
Right.
I kind of rejected authority a lot through that system. And then when I was growing up and trying to figure things out and learn these tools, the one of her boyfriends, when I was 11, and he knew I was getting my butt kicked every day. He's like, "Well, you're really good at baseball, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm really good at baseball." He goes, "Why don't you just carry your bat around with you?" And I said, "Oh, interesting idea, right?" So I carried around my bat and my mitt, and the next day, same three kids came after me, and I took them all down with a baseball bat. And from then on, they never bugged me again, ever bugged me
Wow.
again. But that gave me a sense of empowerment at the time. And because of that, my mom thought I may have had a temper issue. So she put me in martial arts, which actually ended up being another benefit for me because it helped me with my discipline and so on and so forth. So I believe God's put me in all these positions on purpose. I believe these are life lessons. Um, I There's some great things my mom did as a parent. There's some failures, but I think they're all very beneficial to me in the long run. You know, um,
I
I
couldn't.
grew up in the San Fernando Valley, 100-degree weather in the summer, and we're all walking around barefoot on blacktop. That's just the way it was, you know. So we were grounded, and we didn't even know we're grounded when we were walking around on the grass. So
That's so true.
it was a very, very interesting time. Moving forward, though, the way that affected me was when I got into junior high and high school.
Yeah,
Even though I was undersized, I ended up protecting the kids that were bullied.
of
Um,
course.
in fact, they named me the bully buster at the time.
I love
So,
that.
you know, and I guess that's a badge of honor. So that's kind of what I did is I was always looking out for everybody else. And I think that brings me fast forward to today. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm always looking out for we the people or the little guy, because we have an apparatus that does exactly the opposite from that. So that brings you to about 14 years old, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I love that though, because, the fact, as you said, everything had to happen, right, in order for things to line up, and that's such a God thing. But the fact that, you were the bully buster, and I think you probably had to have those years of being bullied to
Hmm.
get it, right? You had
Absolutely.
to live that. But then you found your bat, your your tool to be able to stand your ground. And and so that vision of who you were and protecting others like you started even back then. And so to me, that's fascinating. And so what's also fascinating is that you said your mom was very liberal and your dad was very conservative. It's fascinating to think how they even could have met. And then if your dad was much of an influence to you at all moving forward, after you were with your mom.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I know how it happened. So they were both conservative when they were together. And
Oh,
then what happened is after, which would have been my older brother, passed away at birth, th- she turned away from God. So she was a Christian, and then she completely turned away from God. Like and I know a lot of people personalize it. Like they think, well, if God existed, this wouldn't happen to me, which to me is that's egocentric, to be honest with you. But that's
mhm.
what she did. She completely turned away from God and started exploring herself and other things. And she ended up in a realm, I think, in the psychological movement. It was extraordinary left wing back there. Free sex, drugs, and everything else was directly connected to the Freudian psychological movement. And if anybody studies the Freudian psychological movement, was a CIA manipulation. It's actually an operation. Um,
Yeah,
it wasn't the intention of the way psychologists would go. And I know psychologists get mad when I say that. I go, well, I'm just speaking facts. It is what it is.
right.
So I believe she did a 180 flip away from that, um,
Yeah,
which was fascinating. But
yeah,
I think it was great for me though, because she put me in an alternative school, which was very helpful to kind of find myself. There was more freedom in an alternative school to do that. Um, and I loved them, but they were very hippy dippy also. But I never would fall into that thing, which was very interesting. It was just never my deal. Um, and ironically, now today, whether people support Trump or not, I can tell you, hippies of old are now Trump supporters of today. Many of them are. because they understand this is about freedom. This is about being who you want to be. This is not about a thumb on top of you. In fact, the liberals have completely flipped over. The liberals used to be all about as much freedom as you can have, and now it's about as
Right.
much control as they could have. So that's been a captured operation, the Democratic Party, for a long time, unfortunately. So I guess moving forward, growing up, played a lot of sports, did things like that. Very self-sufficient.
Was
Had my
baseball your number one? You still could, or did you, was it all of them in junior high and
ba-
high school?
baseball and football, and here's what's funny is I only played intramural and extra sports. I never played officially for a high school team. But outside of it, I was in baseball leagues and football leagues and did all this stuff. Even through college, I did intramural sports, right? Um, the reason why I never played for my actual teams is because I was a knucklehead. So at 16, so I started working when I was 12. I had a paper route, and then I had two paper routes, and then even during the summers when I was 14, I worked in a factory, which I know wouldn't be allowed nowadays. And then at 16, I was full time while I was going to school. I was full time working at Taco Bell. So
Oh,
I understood this, and I purchased my own car. And what happened is, for some reason, and this is twisted, I thought that if I owned my own car, I would have an opportunity to get all the girls and have more freedom. What I didn't realize that if I would have been a star player on the football and the baseball team, they would have paid for everything and they would have drove me anywhere I wanted to go. I never made that connection until years later. So I opted out of organized sports in high school themselves, right? But it was all great lessons. There was a reason for everything. I was very independent.
yeah.
I was good friends with everybody on the football team because they would use me for practice because I was the best wide receiver they had. So they would put their defenders against me. Um, I was I was friends with chess club, friends with the stoners, friends with it was interesting. So I was accepted by all these communities, um, which is kind of cool, even though I never joined any community whatsoever. So
Mhm.
I was guess what I was like a nomad, but it was all great. It was all about what I know now, that God was positioning me for the future. I didn't have a
Yeah.
clue back then what it was about.
Right.
So
Right.
then I had a struggle through high school because I was really good at studies, but I refused to do any homework because
Oh,
I had this in my head. I had this justification that if you pass the test or get a high score on a test or 100%, why would you need to do homework? So I had a lot of challenges with my instructors. I remember being in a math class, and I just told this story, which is interesting. I was in a math class, and I kept correcting the algebra teacher on the board because he would miscalculate, and I would be really nice. Hey, sir, da da da. Can you fix that? He's like, oh yeah, no problem. Next thing you know, he didn't even have the courage to tell me. He took me out of a high algebra class and put me in a basic math class. So he got the I guess either vice principal or principal to sign off on it. Next day, I'm sitting inside of a basic math class. I'm like, why would I be downgraded? I actually knew this stuff better than the teacher did, but it's because I refused to do the homework, and how dare I correct him, right? This is kind of the thing that I've dealt with through my whole life. So in that basic math class, I got all straight A's, and he says, you have to do your homework. I go, I'm not doing my homework. I said, it's a waste of time. Why would I spend my time doing something that I already know how to do? I said, I want to
right.
learn. I already know this. I want to learn. And then he called me out publicly, and I publicly gave him the same answer, which he thought was offensive. Right. So the next thing you know is I'm in a consumer math class. And I did the same thing in the consumer math class. I got straight A's on all the tests, 100%, refused to do the homework. She was very sweet. Her son actually was playing, I believe, pro football for the Chargers. She was very
Mhm.
nice. At the end of the year, she only gave me a C plus. I'm like, why would you give me a C plus? She goes, you didn't do all your work. I said, but I got a straight A's on all the tests. This is my mindset. I'm not even saying it's right. I'm just saying that was my mindset.
Right.
So the next year she called me. She goes, I'd like you to be a teacher's aide in my class. I'm like, I got a C plus. Why would you want me to get a teacher's aide? She goes, because you know this stuff better than anybody else. Great. At the first day of class, she goes, okay, Lewis, hand out all these papers. I handed them out, didn't even read them. And then she read out loud what it said. And it was a contract for all the students to sign that if they don't do their homework at 80%, that they will fail the class. And of course, all the students are moaning and groaning. And her reply was, well, talk to that guy in the corner. It's his fault. I'm like, what the heck? So this was then, unbeknownst to her, every time somebody would turn in their homework, I would just check off 100%. I'm like, fine, I'm not playing that game. And she figured out what I did like halfway through, and she was actually okay with it. She's like, "You got me," She goes, because she knew what she did was wrong, and she was an honorable person, I think. So
Wow.
that's kind of the way the high school experience was for me. And
Right.
then I was actually, because of their manipulation, I was 5 credits short, but because of my testing, the vice principal, he was a good guy. He took care of me, right?
Oh,
He's
nice.
he signed off on it. He's like, you know the stuff. You have all your credits. You're good to go. So I got to walk, um, but I would push it to the limits.
Yeah.
I remember being awake 48 hours straight, having to turn in all my homework for a computer class just to get a passing grade because I refused to do all of the homework. And at the last second, he says, so this one bit me in the butt. At the last second, 2 days before, he goes, you're not passing because you didn't do your homework. And I said, well, I have to graduate. He goes, sorry, not going to happen. And it was a double unit class. So I said, okay, I'll do the homework. He goes, there's no way you're going to do the homework. I said, if I do the homework and I get it to you within 48 hours, are you going to pass me? He says, absolutely. So I stayed up for 48 hours straight and did all this to make sure I passed. So all these make us who we are today,
Yeah,
which I
absolutely.
which I think is
You
amazing.
It is amazing, and so at that point too, you said you were juggling a full-time job, Taco
Right,
Bell,
right. I
right?
had a
At the same
full-time job.
time, which is crazy, and you had your car, and this is a side note, did the car help with the girls at all?
It I don't know if it did. I was never afraid to talk to somebody. So I had no
Big
problem.
shocker.
I had no problem with the girls, and it wasn't based on my looks or anything like that. It definitely wasn't based on my money, right? I think it was just based on my confidence. My wife has even told me
Yeah,
to that. She says the most attractive thing about you is your confidence, and I was
yeah.
very, very confident. So I had very good looking friends, and they're always like, "How do you get the girls?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just talk, right? I don't know what it is, but." So that worked out fine for me. I was never that was really never a challenge. I mean, I'm blessed with that, and I can't say it's looks or anything. It's probably just confidence or just maybe just willing to have a conversation. Because I,
Absolutely.
I remember the most popular, most beautiful girls in school, as they would be equated to, had conversations with me and said, guys never asked me out, and I couldn't figure it out. And I figured out they're just intimidated. They're just afraid to get the no, right? And that was never a fear of mine. So um, it was interesting growing up for sure.
That's so interesting, Lewis, is because obviously, you're that man. That's who you are. I mean, you're not afraid to hear no. You're not afraid to be able to talk to people. You have this inner confidence, but obviously that came with those different stories that happened in your life. And, you know, even in high school, probably, even though it was hard to have a full-time job, but also going to high school, you did see having job that, okay, if you did a good job, why do the homework? I've got a real job here I've got to go to. And so all those things, I mean, it wasn't just because you didn't want to do the homework, you also had a full-time job that you had to go to. I mean, and so all of those decisions, obviously help with your confidence. It had to, because when you're in a family situation where you don't have um, the authority to really give you that confidence, you have to be able to have situations and have it somehow innately within you to find it. And I find it fascinating. that knowing after I've watched your shows for so many years, understand that about you. Um, so when high school finished and you had a good guy as the principal, thank goodness, what w- were things wide open to you? Did you think, "Oh gosh, what am I going to do?" What happened then?
No, that's a great question. Let me just calculate something for everybody so they know. I was actually kicked out of my mom's house when I was 14, so I ended up living with my dad through high school.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is important because that it was important. So I moved to a completely different city. Actually moved
Okay,
from the valley to Laverne, California. Um, and
so
the
why were you kicked out, first of all?
So it was fascinating. So what happens is I was always a good kid. So for example, if my friends and I were riding bicycles and they would kick over a trash can, I would make them go pick it up or pick it up myself, right? That's how I was. If they tried to pickpocket or I'm not pickpocket or try to steal something from a grocery store, I'd always say no, put it back. We're not going to do that. That's kind of how I always was. But I guess I always found a loophole. In fact, my nickname later in life became Loophole Louie. So my mom would say, "Be home by the time the street lights are on." I said, "Okay, mom. So what you're saying is when the street lights are on, I have to come home." She goes, "Absolutely." So I would travel the whole neighborhood with my friends to find streets that had no lights. And then at night, I would convince my friends we would play football or baseball on somebody's street that they didn't even know us because it had no lights, or we would just hang out and sit on the curb and talk or do whatever when it got too dark to play. And I would go home and I'd say, "Mom, the street I was on had no lights. What am I going to do?" She's like, "Well," and then I would do it again and again. So things like that started to irritate her. And to be honest, I think she just wanted to be single.
Yeah.
She was dating a bunch and stuff like that. I think she was just done with being a mom at the time. So she sent me to my dad. Now the challenge there, my dad is awesome. Love my dad, amazing. But he was 52 when I was born, right?
Oh,
He was 22 years older than my mom. In fact, I have a half brother that I didn't get to know till later in life, right? So he was 52 when I was born. So by the time I moved into him, he was in his late 60s, and I was probably too much for him to handle. He said all the right things, mentored the right things, but I think I was too much for him to handle. So in essence, I was still kind of raising myself. In fact, when I was 17, so my birthday is on June 2nd, and I think I graduated right around June 3rd-ish, somewhere around there. And I my goal was to move out when I was 18, right? And my dad's like, "Nope, nope, you can't do it." But I said, "When I'm 18, I can make my own decision." He goes, "Yeah, make your own decision." So unbeknownst to him, I convinced a guy that ran an apartment building in Pomona. I gave him cash. I gave him half down cash. I convinced him, even though I was 17, to hold this apartment for me, write up the lease, and I'll sign it on my 18th birthday and move in. And sure enough, that's what I did. I signed it my 18th birthday and I moved in um, right then into Pomona because I wanted my independence. And I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs. I never have done that's never been my wheelhouse. It's still to this day, don't do drink, don't do anything like that. So, but that was so on my 18th birthday, I had my freedom, according to me. My dad hated it and admired it at the same time because that's how he was, right? So you can
right.
tell, but he wouldn't tell you. So
Yeah.
did my thing. I opted not to go to college at the time, and I say at the
Mhm.
time for a reason. So I ended up working in sales for a place now that's debunked called Montgomery Wards, and
Ah,
I sold tires. You know it, right?
yeah, the
So
catalog.
yeah, exactly. So they had big, huge stores back then, and they had a tire store, and I would sell tires. They really wanted me to sell their bias ply Montgomery Ward tire and not the Michelins. But the problem that they had is they trained me on the Michelin. So I found out that those were epic tires. Those are best for people's safety. They last the longest. Dollar for dollar, you get more out of that more expensive tire. So I only sold Michelins. I wouldn't sell anything. So at 18, I became the number one highest grossing tire salesman in the whole company.
Wow.
and they fired me.
Ah,
Well, I
because
can't
they
say
weren't with no reward?
I can't say they fired me. They moved me into another position because they didn't like I would convince all the other salespeople not to sell this shitty tire. They couldn't stand that, right? So they moved me. Then I became the youngest service advisor in the history of their company. At 18, I was actually a service advisor, which was the manager over all the mechanics, right? And I did that for a while because they didn't want to get rid of me, but they couldn't have me in that position. So this rebellious nature is all based on doing good though. And that's
Yeah,
what I don't think most people understood when I was younger. The rebellious nature wasn't to rebel just to rebel. It was
right,
based on what I thought was logical thinking.
right.
Like, why on earth would I sell a tire to somebody, even if it's less expensive, that they have a higher chance of injury, breaking down, and it doesn't last as long? And then I did the math. I go, okay, this lasts 50,000, this lasts 25,000, da 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 da. Look, you get more for your money on this tire, anyways. Boom. So to me, I couldn't even conceive of selling a bias ply little crappy tire. It just wouldn't didn't even cross my mind. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not judging them. I'm not even judging myself. I just think that's just my mindset. It was always about what's the absolute best can do, and I don't care. So that kind of brought me fast forward, and then I was very wild, though. I have to admit that, very, very wild. I mean, I do anything you can imagine when it comes to jumping off of cliffs or doing this, and I broke my tailbone jumping off the cliffs, skydiving. I've separated both my Achilles tendons. I mean, the list goes on and on and on from that stuff.
My God.
So I was in 19 and I was visiting my friends in the San Fernando Valley because remember I still lived in Pomona, Laverne area in Inland Empire. I was visiting them, and they were all partying, which I didn't do, but I would hang out with them when they partied. And we were driving down. I believe it was would it be Sherman? Was it Sherman Way? I think. Is it Sherman Way? Yeah, I think it was Sherman Way. Anyways, middle of the valley. We're driving down, and I was led by my stomach at that age. I was exercising a lot, so on and so forth. And I'm standing up in the middle, in the back with my friend of this jacked up Toyota pickup truck, which is super high. And I saw Bob's Big Boy. And I yell, Bob's, Jason, get in a Bob's. He's like, okay. He turns. Now we're standing in the back, which is unallowable nowadays. Jumped up in the curb, pull in the parking. We couldn't believe we even survived, right? Turn around. He was excited too, I guess, and he forgot to turn the engine off and he popped the clutch. And it just jumped forward, which threw me to the back, and I saw that the bed was going to come. So I went to jump over the bed and my toe hit it, which sent me head down. Long story short, my shoulder separated. I dislocated my shoulder and it punctured and it busted my spleen in half. Two of my friends went in the restaurant. My best friend said, I'm going to stay with you. You don't look good. I'm like, I'm cool. I'm cool. Within about a minute, I said, Jimbo, I've got internal bleeding. He's like, "What? How do you know?" I go, "I don't know. It's cold. It feels weird." He says, "Let me go get the friends." All I remember is him saying, "Let me go get the friends." And then I woke up in the back of the truck with a whole bunch of nurses and doctors around me with smelling salts. I guess they thought I was going to die because I was in convulsions in the back of the truck. And here's another death experience. I've never seen the light, by the way, ever. So I I'm in the back of the truck. They get me in there. They couldn't figure out what was wrong because at the time they never saw a broken spleen without a broken rib, is what I was told later. So they're trying to figure it out. They finally put me in for X-ray, and they saw my shoulder, my arm dropped and started swinging. And the one of the guys was smart enough, I think, a radiologist, and they said, "I bet you his shoulder dislocated, and his elbow went into his stomach. Let's look at the spleen." So they looked at the spleen, and he was 100% right, and it was cut in half. So, and I guess I already had an overlarge spleen, which would be probably why I healed so fast when I was younger. Another God thing, right? So I'm
Right.
on the table, I'm out, my mom's holding my hand, getting me to sign some disclosure. She leaves the room, and then I heard, "We've lost him." And the next thing you know, I woke up and I was, had surgery, like 44 staples in my belly, and I guess the doctor said I told him to save my belly button, so they went around it, which is hilarious. And they removed my spleen, and I had, things in my nose and all over. So that's fascinating. That's I've gone through that
Yeah.
several times since in my life. I've been right at the brink. So I believe for some reason God's pulling me back and saying, "It's not your time. It's not your time. It's not your time." Um, but that's fascinating that I actually heard them say we've lost him.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened after that because I don't remember anything. I never saw light, never did anything. I just remember I woke up in in the uh, in the recovery room afterwards.
So I have so many questions. One of the questions when you heard they said, "We've lost him." Do you know if that was in a room where your mom
No, she was already
was?
gone. She was already gone because they were prepping me for surgery. In fact,
Okay.
the doctor asked me before, I guess, that do you want us to save your belly button? And I said yes. Instead of cutting through it. Sorry, I keep
And
getting this call. I apologize.
no, you're totally fine. Well, that is it's so amazing to me that you have been on the brink several times in your life, actually, and that's not uncommon, that I've heard, which is just for people who are just so faithful in your shoes, it's and such leaders. So I just have to skip back first to Montgomery Ward because Montgomery Ward, that's so interesting to me because what you back then in your mind thought just because my authority is telling me I need to sell their tires, you weren't going to do it just because your authority told you to do it because you knew that you had to go the route of selling the superior product,
Yeah,
right? And so
I had
you
to
were never a
sell
guy
what
just to do
right.
something just because the authority told you to do,
Never, never. It was,
which is fascinating.
do what's right, not what they want you to do. It's all I don't know
Yeah.
where I got that from. It's just it's built in.
But that's amazing to me because there you go. I mean, that pattern continues with you, and that's why I love these stories. And so also when you said you were so wild, well, you weren't really when it came to drinking, drugs, and all that stuff. You were
Right.
just a risk taker with yourself,
Right,
right?
exactly right. Exactly right. Never dove in. So I've never drank in my life. I may have had like a quarter of a beer or, with a cigar, I would have had like a tasting of cognac or something like that, but really never drank. Not my deal. Um, when I was 14 for about a month, I did smoke weed like every single day. And then one day I was in class and I was really good at math, and on the board it was like 3 times 3. And I was like, "Wow, what would that be?" And at that moment, I'm like, "Wait a second." That was it. I was done, never again.
Yeah, that is wild. And so, and because yes, and so this after the what happened with your spleen obviously took you a while to recover.
Mhm.
And then what happened then after that?
So then I transitioned careers, ended up moving back to the San Fernando Valley, working for some companies, meeting some phenomenal people. I was mentored by some people, met a good friend there, um, did my thing, and then ended up working for companies that adjusted insurance, mechanical insurance.
Mhm.
Did really well, got promoted up the ladder pretty quick on that, and then ended up later on, a few years later, again, I got in a motorcycle accident, and
Oh,
then that's a fascinating story in itself, what happened there. But then I ended up getting based on friction, I ended up getting second and third degree burns on my skin. They finally get me out of the hospital, thought I was okay, and then I got blood poisoning because of that, and then almost died from that. And that ended up being took him like 5 or 6 days to cure me, and I got kicked out of the hospital because I was so anxious about sitting in bed all day. I would hold my IV stand and run circles around the nurses station for exercise. And finally, they're like, "We got to get this guy out of here." The nurses love me, but the doctors were like, "Yeah, he's making us look bad." So they sent me home to heal, and then I moved on from there and started really getting into sales and other things, and did fairly well on there.
And so, would you say that sales was the prominent thing that helped uh, your work time, and you were the most successful? Which I could see as you're so personable and confident, obviously. So, was that your strong point area when you were uh, building your career? Let's say.
Well, what I was attracted to with sales is two things. One is a good salesperson. There's no cap on your income in most cases,
Yeah.
so somebody wasn't controlling my income. And I figured out really quick that if you're good at your job, they just leave you alone,
Yeah.
right? And those two things, being at a young age, were extraordinarily attractive to me. And then sales were very systematized, which I didn't like, but I used it at the beginning until I started to develop my own techniques. And finally, in fact, I'm probably going to write a book called Sales as Service and Service as Sales, because
Oh,
I've trained thousands of salespeople later on in life, but doing it a completely different way, doing it through authenticity, loving the person that you're talking to, and really trying to find what's absolutely best for them.
yeah.
Then my abilities, when I had learned that, and I was young, I was probably in my 30s when I'd learned that, and it just my careers just skyrocketed. Um, some of them were very frustrated because I wouldn't do it their way, though, because
Mhm.
they wanted to have a robotic sales force, and I was unwilling to do that. So they would promote me or put me away from other salespeople. It was really weird. So I would make more money, but I was isolated in some businesses, and I'm talking about Fortune 500 companies. Um, it's fascinating. So I ended up really becoming a troubleshooter in my 30s, and so for 24-hour fitness, I was a troubleshooter. So we were in divisions of about 42 clubs, and they would say, okay, what club is doing the worst? Send Lewis in there for 3 months, 6 months, and I'd bring it to the top. And then I would go to another club and another club and another club. Is kind of what I did. Then I got headhunted, and I ended up with Gold's Gym, and took their club. And in 2005, I actually won, out of 600 clubs, won Club of the Year
Wow.
worldwide, out of a club that they said would never do anything. And the other franchisees were really against the owner that was at that club. So um, I'm I love troubleshooting, and that's pretty much what I'm doing today in the this patriot movement. Is that's why I've created so many programs. Is I always believe there's a solution, and I've trained our wonderful kids. They know they cannot say the word "can't" around me, or that's that's worse than a cuss word.
Absolutely, and I just love to see how I love to see that pattern too, because as we've been talking, when you said you were a math student and, you question things, they moved you to a math, and then you said in sales, they moved you here, but then ultimately, with all of that, you were able to be a star troubleshooter, obviously, and then what would you say was, like, the biggest point for you when you started to see outside of your life, what was happening in the world that was not what was everyone else was seeing? What was the point where you're like, "Oh my goodness, wait a minute, what is happening here?" And you could see it.
Well, it was a few things. So I used to manage a plumbing division for large commercial plumbing company, and I was also a troubleshooter there. So they would send me and one other guy around virtually all of Southern California if they couldn't figure something out. And what happened is I ended up getting hepatitis when I was with hepatitis C when I was with them, and it took forever to diagnose. I've never been a real sleeper, so I would sleep 4 hours, work 12, no problem. And it got to a point where I was had to sleep 12 to work 4, which was I was seriously sick, on the brink of just not existing anymore. And they finally figured out what it was. But while I had this hepatitis, I was always looking for solutions, as we know, right? That's just what I do. So they had me on a form of chemotherapy, interferon. I had to inject in my leg 3 times a day. Um, but to help my liver, my kidney was in so much pain, and I felt horrible all day long. It was not the way to live. So I started to study, and I got a book by a gentleman called Dr. McDougall. And Dr. McDougall at the time was probably the most famous cardiologist in the world, and he actually quit his practice because he figured out that nutrition would cure more of his heart patients than his services. So
Wow.
he threw away millions of dollars to do the right thing. So I started to study this, and then I did 3 months of the interferon, went back in, had a relapse. They wanted to give me 6 months more, so they started sending the injections to my house, but they didn't know I was reading this book. And then I got a hold of something called the Merck Manual. Now, the Merck Manual is available today. Back then, it was only for doctors, and it would tell you, excuse me, the side effects of a drug. And the particular drug they were giving me had a 100% chance that it would damage your kidneys and a 67% chance, I believe it was, that it could help you through your liver issue, which is hepatitis. And I go, wow, geez, I may not be great at math, but that math doesn't add up for me. So I'm reading the book about nutrition. I'm like, I think I could cure myself nutritionally. So 6 months go by, I'm getting all these injections, and I didn't take one of them, and I cured myself nutritionally. I
Wow.
go back in for testing, and they go, "See, we told you it would work." And I gave them the big FU, and I took all their things and I handed it back to them. I go, "I didn't take one of your dangerous meds." So that was a huge paradigm shift for me.
Yeah.
Another time in life, I was in another accident. I was getting with a chiropractor, and he explained that the reason why people get side effects from pharmaceuticals is because they're made from synthetics. Our body rejects synthetics as a poison. So to me, pharmaceuticals were out. That was common sense then. So all of these things started to add up. And then when I ended up moving with my wife at the time temporarily to another state, actually Las Vegas in Nevada, and I had a lot of I didn't sleep much at night, so I started listening to a program which many people would know is called Coast to Coast with Art Bell, right?
Yes.
So that was part of my awakening, and then later on I started studying harp on my own, and then I found out that the US government uh, and Google in my opinion, conspired to push all the harp messages down their page because right when Google started to become popular, we were learning about harp. And although we didn't have regular social media, we did have email. So we would email everybody, check this page out, check this page out. And at the time, you could spell harp wrong and get weather manipulation about harp. Well, at that time when we were learning all this and it was really getting traction, the US government released the most progressive mortgage refinance program in the history. And guess what they named it? They named it HARP. And within a day, you couldn't find the stuff that we were finding in the top. Down 10, 11, 12 pages, you couldn't find it. At that moment, I'm
Wow.
like, I see what happened. And then I've been ever since then. And that's, probably about 20 some years ago, I've been really studying this stuff pretty deeply. Here on and
Yeah,
off, to
you
be honest.
you are such a warrior, and it's interesting because of your physicality and having accidents and doing things like that. It started out with the health side of things, which led to other things. Because we always, I think all of us have one thing that gets us on that path and then it leads. But there's just some of us like you that continue and can see it in other areas. And so, my one last thing I would love to touch on is that so if your mom had gone the 180 that you talked about, And for those first 14 years, you really didn't have um, that knowledge of of God, and that relationship with God, since your mom wasn't done that 180, right? Where do you think that your spirituality has come from? Where did it, how did that develop, and has it grown, would you say, over the last couple years?
Well, I think it was purely divine, because even back then I believed in God, and I had no religious influence whatsoever in
Yeah.
regards to that. My father was a Baha'i. My mom was an atheist. You know what I mean? So, and my kids all went to Christian churches. I mean, not my kids. My friends all went when we were kids. All my friends went to Christian churches. So every once in a while, I would go to their church. I'd be bored out of my mind. This isn't for me. But there was always that connection to God. I knew there was a higher power, and I think when it really took it to a whole nother level for me was maybe 7, 8 years ago. And as a troubleshooter and who I was really good at putting that square peg into the round hole. I would win, but winning wasn't always pretty. I would work so hard. I would blood, sweat, literally blood, sweat, whatever it took to get the job done, I'd get it done, which people may look as a positive. I guess a business owner would look at me as a positive because it benefits them. But ultimately, that will break you down. And then for something hit me, and I go, "What's that voice? That first voice that always comes into my head?" And I always try to justify it as something different, or I try to recalculate, or I argue with it. Blah blah blah. I'm like, I wonder if that's God, because He's always giving me these ideas, right? So I just said, you know what? I'm just going to let go. This was 7, 8 years ago. I'm just going to let go. And when that I started getting that information, it was like everything just flowed so beautifully. It could still be hard work, but it was everything was simple. And I've come up with this saying: if it's simple, it's God's work. If it's messy, it's something else. So it just flowed so beautifully. So now, even when I made the decision to become governor, that was just that instinct, that voice, that God spark was like, "This is what you're doing." I'm like, okay, why is that? Don't want to do that. No, you're doing it right. And there you go. So it made the outcomes are the same or even better now, but the I could accomplish a lot more because there's less effort, because it just flows along the line I'm supposed to be on, that I didn't know back in the day.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love that. And that I've heard, I interviewed Jordan Clark, and he's said very similar things, and he really thinks the world of you, and it's just amazing how these stories start to or have similar paths in different ways, and I just love that so much to hear your story, Lewis. It's just has been so great to have you, and I just have to say, not only has I appreciate you being with me, but I truly do and have admired you for years. I've watched you be a warrior for children, trafficking, all the underdogs in the most stressful ways. You've given them voice without having to carry a bat, and and you just are amazing, and I am so grateful for you to be here, and I know you are going to make amazing changes in California, and you already have, and you're going to continue to do so, and I'm just so grateful for you and your team, and for giving me this opportunity to share your story. So thank you so much, Lewis. I appreciate your time so much.
I appreciate you, and I have to give props to my wife, because I wouldn't be here without her. She's done everything in her support for me. It's just absolutely incredible. And my 7 kids, some of them have disowned me because of this, but most of them are on board.
Well, that's like part 2. I need to
I
hear all
was,
about that
I was
that
thinking the whole thing. There's a whole nother story here.
yes. Can we do a part 2 sometime?
Absolutely.
That would be wonderful. So thank you so much again. I appreciate you so much, and I'll keep watching everything you're doing for sure.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay, take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.